Well, I just want to remind ourselves what Labour have been telling us about people who've been calling for this inquiry. There are some very, very senior politicians, including the Prime Minister, including the Chancellor, including the Health Secretary and the Culture Secretary, who over the last year have been telling us what we should think about ourselves, what we should feel, and how we should be branded far right for saying that there should be an independent inquiry into these rape gangs. This is what our politicians have been telling us on a number of different media, including yesterday, when Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, told Sky News that it wasn't about the feelings of people being hurt, it was about the victims. She's right in that. But why call people racist in the first place? Let's just remind ourselves what Labour's been saying over the last year.
Calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics.
No, the reason we're not doing another national inquiry is because there's already been a national inquiry.
Do you want an inquiry or not?
No, Paul, I'm trying to answer your question, and the answer is no. We don't think another inquiry, after all the many inquiries that we've put victims through, is the way to tackle this.
What we're doing is increasing the action on these vile crimes, child sexual exploitation and abuse. And understandably, victims and survivors want stronger action. That's what we're doing. There has been a huge amount of misinformation this week. Sadly, party political misinformation. It is just wrong.
Yeah. Sorry about the audio problem there at the end. That was Rachel Reeves. You've heard Yvette Cooper there, and then we were trying to hear Rachel Reeves, but couldn't. She was saying that people who've been branded racist shouldn't have their... we shouldn't worry about their hurt feelings. We should worry about the victims. Frankly, I'm going to worry about both. But one thing I'm really interested in is what the police actually do and how these crimes are detected. We keep hearing about community policing. I always wonder what that really means, and I'm someone who knows a little bit about policing, but one man who knows a heck of a lot more than I do is Jon Burrows, who is a senior Police Service of Northern Ireland officer. He's a columnist and a justice commentator. Jon, you're very welcome to the programme this morning. This national inquiry is now happening. We don't know exactly what form it's going to take. We'll hear from the Home Secretary later today in the House of Commons. But Jon, I wonder if you could take us inside the police forces that are dealing with this, because we keep hearing about community policing. We keep hearing about how police needs to be by consent. But I wonder if it's perhaps being compromised in some of these communities. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. The concept of community policing by consent is that you're working in cooperation with the law-abiding majority of citizens, that they are policing is approachable, it's responsive, it listens, it treats people fairly, it explains what it's doing as best it can. But what policing with consent is policing with permission. What it is not is sacrificing doing the right thing because of some potential adverse consequence. Good policing with the community manages consequences of what you do. It does not allow you to become managed by the consequence. And one of the problems here has been that a fear of being branded racist, a fear of damaging cultural relations has stopped the police doing what they should do, which is to enforce the law without fear or favour and to protect young people and protect citizens. So they've almost got community relations back to front. And instead of actually managing the tensions that might result from doing this investigation, they have avoided doing what they should do for fear of those negative consequences.
Jon, I wonder, I mean, you're an expert in public order, you've policed Northern Ireland for a long time as well. We've seen community policing there, I think, sometimes being compromised, sometimes community leaders, some with nefarious backgrounds perhaps, actually sometimes telling the police what they can and can't do. I wonder on a wider scale in regard to these gangs, whether the police actually know their communities sometimes, whether they can be informed, whether they can really properly get to the heart of these issues, rather than simply being told, perhaps, you're racist, you're saying the wrong thing, you're being culturally insensitive, when actually what is straightforward and what they should uphold all the time is the law.
Yeah, you often end up with gatekeepers. So you will have people of influence in a community that, instead of allowing you to understand what the community feels and is thinking, will actually tell you what they think you need to hear. And that will be the same throughout the United Kingdom. I often hear when we're talking about, for example, disorder in parts of England, you see senior police officers saying, well, we're engaging with community representatives. Often those representatives are not representative of the community. They are a small number of people who become empowered by a kind of docile approach that the police take to them, and they are empowered and actually don't hear what's really going on in those communities. So, this is a really good example. And this fear of being labelled racist is, I think, a national disease that is not just damaging, in this case, individual vulnerable children, but actually is a risk to national security. If you look back, the similar thing happened, the Manchester Arena inquiry. I actually wrote this down just to get it word for word before I came in. A security guard was told by a member of the public that the bomber was in the vicinity and acting suspiciously. That security guard looked at the bomber and thought, he looks out of place, fidgety, wearing a backpack, sweating, something wasn't right. And here's what the security guard said to the inquiry: I was scared of getting it wrong, reporting it to the police, in case I was branded racist. And you see, this has caused a massive fear. And instead of people doing their job honestly and using their professional judgment,
and without fear or favour, we hear that all the time, without fear or favour, but they're afraid, they're fearful themselves. They're
fearful themselves, fearful of being branded a racist. And then the other, it's not just the fear of being branded a racist, it's the fear of not being supported by your line management and your authorities. And so when you have a Prime Minister who is calling those who want an inquiry that would be fearless and get to the truth as playing to a far-right agenda, you can see that this comes from the very top. And this is where community policing has got itself back to front. And it actually becomes a disabler to proper policing instead of what it should be, which is an enabler. What actually good community policing would be is the police would be all over this like a rash. They would have good lines of intelligence. They would understand, really closely working with their partners like children's homes and other statutory agencies. They would have, inroads into that community that really understood that there was a disproportionality amongst Pakistani men. Not all men, actually, the vast majority are not into this, but would understand the disproportionality, would understand the risks and vulnerabilities, and would then be able to gather that intelligence. But instead, they did the opposite, and that was to take the easy way out and not look at this with sufficient curiosity.
And Baroness Casey herself expected to explicitly link the grooming gang problem to men of Pakistani origin and say that white British girls who were targeted were institutionally ignored for fear of racism. It's just happening still to this day, and it appears that Baroness Casey, what she'll say later today or later this week, absolutely backing up what you're saying there, Jon.
It is a problem that has stalked us for years. It is political correctness gone mad, and it is a real, and that's why I've said it's not just a matter of individual safety. These were the most vulnerable girls in society. And by the way, a bit like a burglar goes and targets homes, they don't simply target any home. They will target homes that have the least security, that are the easiest to get in and get out. And the people who target these young girls choose those who are in the care system, choose those who have difficult family dynamics, choose those from areas of social and economic deprivation, because they're less likely to have the support networks, the parent who's checking their phone, less likely to be believed. And what did you see here? The police actually fell into that trap, because when the girls reported it, well, they're not of great character. Oh, you're not credible. You're not believable.
Well, they labelled some of them prostitutes. Final question, Jon. Can we get out of this? Can we fix this as a cultural, as a policing cultural problem, a societal cultural problem, where we don't say things for fear of being branded racist, where we actually do proper community policing and do this quite literally without fear or favour?
The answer is yes, we can, but it requires a huge job of work, of leadership, of change of culture, and a massive plan of action. And that needs to go through like a stick of rock. It needs to go through the centre of that stick of rock, and it needs to be a national strategy. How do we change that? And actually, those at the top of our institutions, like prime ministers, chief constables, leaders of councils, they have to set the tone and say, as long as you're an honest citizen, you will be supported if you raise concerns, that we're not going to throw people under the bus if there's consequences like racial sensitivities, and we're going to actually be colourblind as a society. And without fear or favour, go for justice.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll manage the outworkings of that, but let justice be done if the heavens fall should actually be the mantra that we all follow, from the media to the police to council leaders, and particularly those in power and Parliament.
Jon, thank you. That's Jon Burrows there, columnist and justice commentator, former senior officer in the police service in Northern Ireland.